that we can use to help grow our economy in this critical demographic, which I have sadly aged out of now, but I really value that work that you're doing. A couple of quick questions. In terms of the communication piece, when I moved back to Chatham-Kent, I felt the same way, that there was not a lot of stuff to do for people our age. But as I got more familiar with moving back home and settling back in my community, I often found out that I just wasn't aware of the different opportunities that were available. Are you finding that? Is it also an awareness piece? Like how do we know what we don't know? Is there a place where we can find out, like a central hub of information to find out what is going on and what stuff there is to do?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do believe that that is a big part of it. Often when we dig into the nuance and people are asking for specific things, oftentimes they exist. It's just becoming aware that they exist. But of course, you know, as our population grows, there's also a demand for more things in general as well. And as our population changes, there's a desire for different things. So it's a little bit of both of those things. And finding ways together to communicate what is happening and what is available is, I think, the challenge that's put forward in front of us.
Thank you. I also see the point made several times that there is frustration with survey respondents, that you feel that council can do a better job at ensuring your voices are heard. Do you have any suggestions for us on how we can do that?
That certainly is a key takeaway, and it wasn't pointed at any one particular person or group, but I think that that too is a challenge for us to all take away, is when we're hearing, one, when we want to attract or to engage a certain demographic of people, is to be cognizant that we are speaking to them, and when we hear certain things that they want, I think when we deliver it, sometimes we forget to say, we heard X and therefore we delivered Y and Z, and that's true of myself as well. So I wonder if, back to your previous point, there's a bit of an awareness component there as well. But two, I hope that it's just continuing to engage with our population and our communities to do the best we can to meet the needs that are asked of us.
Thank you, and I definitely want to make sure we talk about it in our strat plan session, so I appreciate Councillor McGregor mentioning that. Last but not least, do you feel in this survey, I saw it, I think on page 22 and 25 briefly mentioned, but maybe not as much in the other sections, do considerations like a welcoming community, an inclusive community, a diverse community, were those considerations included in your survey questions, or was that more in the umbrella of a quality of life type question, or did you specifically reference that in your questions?
So it wasn't a specific question, but that's an interesting thought to maybe put in, so we can pull it out in a more quantitative way. But it is definitely brought throughout the questions in the survey. So I think that we can fairly say it's an important consideration for young people. The commentary reflects that throughout, and it is ranked, as you said, in some of those pieces where it's available. But what we do here is, like through the comment section, through conversations with the advisory group, is diversity of events that they want to see, more culturally diverse events as an example. They want to see more safe spaces as examples. Some of these terminologies come out. One of the slides had mentioned within what would attract or retain you in an organization, cultural shifts. So some of the commentary we saw in there reflected some diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice themes that people would want to see or would find attractive in an organization that they were a part of. So certainly we see it reflected back to us from young people as important.
Thank you very much, and great job on that report.
I just want to add the survey is certainly very important, and I very much encourage all of council to pay heed to it as we move into the strategic planning session, because as we move forward, that number that was growing, we want to see that continue on. And I got to say that the couple times I've been to the meeting, the enthusiasm's over the top, the engagement, and that's so important. So thank you for all the work you do, because it provides a voice for the thousands of young people in our community, because we're not always thinking as we're 22 years old. So it really helps that we hear the viewpoint of the people we want to keep here. So thank you.
Our next item is 17B, Greenhouse Lighting Bylaw.
Okay, we'll try this again. Councillor Anderson and Councillor Doyle, can you put this on the floor, please?
Happy to move that, Your Worship.
And Councillor Doyle, quick, run to your microphone. You gonna second that?
I will second that.
Excellent. Councillor Anderson, the floor is yours, followed by Councillor Doyle and Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I just wanted to give thanks to the OGVG here tonight that did your deputation. Thank you very much for showing your support on this motion. And also I wanted to applaud CK for taking a very proactive stance on this bylaw and making it really something that I think is like was said by the OGVG, it is good for everybody. And I think that, you know, it's a really important thing to do now rather than try to implement something later, as we've seen with a neighboring municipality that has really struggled with implementing any sort of lighting bylaw. So I just wanted to take a second to applaud the municipality for bringing something like this forward, and I'm more than happy to support it fully.
Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So I guess my question would be with regards to page 5, number 5. So I guess first I'm more or less in support of this whole thing. Number 5 says provides an extended phase-in period of 18 plus months to allow existing operators with time to comply to the regulation. So just because we had done during the campaign, we did a tour of one of these greenhouses, and they did bring up, I don't remember the exact costs, but what would be the cost for a greenhouse, rough cost for a greenhouse of average size in our area to upgrade or retrofit their greenhouse with the blackout curtains?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. The short answer is it's not cheap. It is an expense. It is a significant expense, and the expense increases if the greenhouse has not been built with the curtains proactively.
Okay, like, are we talking the millions of dollars?
I don't have approximations offhand, but with regards to, there's the curtains and then there's the deployment system that also needs to be built in to make sure that they deploy properly. So, you know, it's I can probably get some numbers, but I don't have them on hand.
Okay, I guess my thing, so it says 18 plus months, so I don't know how lenient you're going to be on that. But if I can remember from that tour that we did, it's in the high millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So I guess my opinion, the bylaw is great for any new ones that are coming in, like you got to abide by these rules, but to potentially tell some of these greenhouses that have already been built to standard at that time to say you have just around 18 months to retrofit your greenhouses with millions of dollars of cost to you. I think that's a kind of a short timeline. So for me, I think like 3 years would probably be something better. It gives them about twice this time. So I guess that was my question. If it's going to cost these millions of dollars, like what's going to be the outcome if they can't pay this millions of dollars within a year and a half to get these things retrofitted, or they can't get the work done in that time because things are backed up.
Bruce, you wanted to comment on that?
Sure.
Sorry, the mic's going on. Thank you, Your Worship. I would just add that to that point, it's we're in a position where we actually don't have a lot of existing greenhouses that have lighting in them now. It's actually we do have. I'm sure mine Truly Green did install in December of 21, but they actually installed it in a new phase, not the whole greenhouse, and they installed it with the blackout curtains. I believe there's one other that will have to come into compliance, and they're aware of that. But for the most part, it's a different situation than we have in Leamington and in Kingsville. So I guess to Councillor Anderson's point, now is the time to put it into place, so at least people are aware of the expectations going forward if you have an existing greenhouse that you're thinking of lighting. So.
Okay, and yeah, like I said, I agree with the bylaw. I think we need to have that in place sooner the better, just so we can make sure everything is abiding by the same rules. Can I make an amendment to provide an extended phase-in period of 3 years to allow existing operations with the time to comply with this regulation? If there's only a couple, I would think that that lighting isn't going to be overly bad for for the municipality of Chatham-Kent, so that does give them a little, if it's gonna be that costly, it gives them a little bit extra time.
Bruce, does that cause any problems? Right, just to clarify.
So I would, the way that reads is, so yeah, it's just with regard to those that have lighting systems in place now, right? That would have that extra time. So it's a very limited number, as I mentioned. So, you know, if you want to afford them a bit more latitude on that, I think that's council's prerogative. But anybody with an existing greenhouse that is planning to install lights, they'd have to comply with the bylaw as it, okay. Just so, make sure council's clear on that. Okay. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Councillor Anderson, are you good with that amendment to 3 years versus 18 months?
No.
Okay. So it's not a friendly amendment then, so.
Can I speak on it?
Yes, Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak on the reasoning for my no on that. The farm that we toured, which was Hacienda Farms, they have the retrofits already in there for if they should choose to use lights, which they don't. They already have it retrofitted that they can just put the shades in. So there wouldn't be a time lapse or an additional cost for them to do that. It would just be the cost of getting the shades, which they would already know they would need because of the bylaw being in place, should they choose to use lights.
Is that the only one? Because it
I believe Truly Green is also retrofitted for shades.
As far as I'm aware of, that's correct. Truly Green has, like I said, in the one phase they have put in, I think they're considering their options for the other phases going forward. But
Okay, yeah, I was just going by what was told to us about the cost, and that seems scary to do in a year or in a year and a half, so that works.
Okay, Councillor Sakachi, then Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor Anderson indicated most of my points during her conversation in the opening piece. I'm good, thank you.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mary Caniff. So as I was reading this report, I was very interested in Kingsville's and how they included the odor. And can we look into that, or why didn't we include that piece?
That's a good question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. The work that was done on the greenhouse lighting bylaw was scoped to council's motion stemming from, I believe, December 2020, which directed that we focus on the lighting issue. But if it is, you know, of council's interest that we look into odors as well, we'd be certainly happy to do so. Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna save that because this is I think that's a separate, or this is a bylaw right now. So I do have a lot of phone calls. Thank you. On the odor situation.
can I just quickly on that point, yeah, it's, the odor piece is a little different. It relates to cannabis directly. All licensed facilities are required to meet odor requirements through, so it is a regulation under the federal legislation, and I think it's very difficult to enforce, frankly, from a municipal perspective, the odor piece. That's why, the municipalities haven't, moved forward with that component as well. So I thought I'd just make everybody aware of that. That's one of the reasons why, and I think that's kind of the reason why we scoped this back, a year and a half ago when we were looking at it as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. So seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-0.
Item 18, Finance, Budget, Information Technology, and Transformation.
18A, Tax Policy 2023.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Bondi, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to do that.
Sure, so seconded.
Councillor Anderson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'd like to start by thanking everyone that came to say deputations today, and also everyone that has contacted me through email and phone. I think I was able to respond to most of you, and if not, I'm happy to carry on this conversation as time goes on. I wanted to specifically speak to some of the deputations tonight. Mr. Jim, when he said that he should not have to pay more It's not about paying more. It's about the reason for the decrease in the first place no longer exists. And that initial decrease was actually for a reason of there being high interest rates, low property costs. So that has not been the case for a very long time. Further, when they talk about the MPAC and wanting the new impact report to come in, I mean, the last one that came in suggested an increase, and that was voted down by council. And the next time, it was also voted down. So I don't think the MPAC makes a difference here, and I don't think that would change any vote around this table as far as that's concerned. You know, I think that all taxes have gone up for everybody, and I can definitely appreciate the burden that puts on everyone. But when you look at, you know, being a counselor and being contacted by residents, industrial and commercial businesses saying, you know, like, we've really taken a hit these last 3 years. Like, when are we going to get a tax ratio decrease, like, and no longer take on this burden of the extra 3%? You know, it's a pretty difficult thing for me to say, oh, you know, like, I'm worried about, you know, it being political suicide if I don't support the farmers. And that's not what I'm here to do. I do support farmers. I support agriculture. I have stated that I support agriculture. If we were talking about infrastructure for rural areas, I would 100% agree with you. If we were talking about cutting down of your trees on your properties to give you more land to grow on, I would 100% support you on that. But when it comes to this tax ratio, there no longer is a reason for it to be at the 22, and it needs to get back up to the 23, which is what I've proposed. Thank you.
Okay, we have a long list of speakers. I've got, I'll just list out who I've got: McGrail, Thompson, Finn, Doyle, Sakachi, and Pinsino, and Mr. Wright, and I'm just B. McGregor. Maybe just put up your hand if you don't want to speak. I think that might be easier. All right, we'll start this with Councillor McGrail, then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. First of all, I would like to have a separate vote for number 5, the farm tax class transition ratio. If we can pull that and vote on that separately.
Yes. So when we get to it, we'll vote for items 1 through 4, plus 6 and 7, and then we'll vote for 5 separately.
Yes, please. Okay. Gord. What was the timeline between sending out the 2 emails and the report being due into them for this agenda? How much time did they have?
Thank you, Councillor.
To respond?
So the council meeting was on April the 3rd. On April the 4th, or maybe even the 3rd, the 4th, I sent an email to the KFA and the Christian Farmers Association, and the report was due on the 11th, so there were 7 days. So there was not time to advertise a public meeting. So this is the avenue we've taken in the past. I reached out to them by email, and if they want to facilitate a discussion, we would entertain that.
Okay, who chose who to email and who not to email, as in groups and individuals?
Myself and Gord. So in the past, these are the groups that have represented the interests of farmers, and they've participated in these discussions. So that's why those groups were chosen.
Okay, do we have a policy around community stakeholder engagement that we usually abide by on other projects that and increases and agenda items throughout the year?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So it depends on some things. There's legislated, like the Planning Act, for example, legislates exactly what notice you give, but things like this, it really would be up to council, knowing that there's a limited time in this case, with the report due 7 days after the motion was made. We felt this was the most efficient way to do it. There wasn't time to, for example, do a Let's Talk CK survey and put it out and advertise it and do some of those things that we often do when we're consulting with the community. This report has to be passed tonight to meet the timelines for printing the tax bills. So we're up against a timeline here. That's why we do tax policies in April. We have tax rate coming to the March 8th council meeting based on what decisions are made tonight. So I think I probably evaded the question there a little bit on what, but it was just a difficult, with the timing, this is the best that we could do.
Okay, thank you. So, I believe everyone and group, deserves opportunity to have their say. And especially, I believe, at that last council meeting, we directed that there was some stakeholder engagement and, it should be done, right, for the report. And so with that stakeholder, engagement, I thought the report should reflect, what that engagement was. As we know, there was nothing in the report because of that, because there was no, you didn't have any engagement at the time that you had to put the report in. This clearly falls short of due diligence, of stakeholder engagement. And if we reflect on that piece and that problem, I don't know how we can actually vote for this increase, because we have not given proper awareness and attendance to these individuals that are going to be affected. There's a process we have witnessed time and time again to ensure proper and meaningful engagement. We missed the mark on this one, I believe. And in conclusion, I deal in facts. And until those facts impact community engagement is presented, I cannot support this at this point in time. I'm up for the conversation. I am. But I'm up for conversation from everybody. And it has to be a complete and a whole conversation. And then we can move forward. But at this point, I truly think we have to think about how this was conducted and was it fair to this group in the process and how it was came about. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Finn.
Thank you very much. I guess my first question is there a benefit to staff workload or municipal efficiency with this change?
In terms of the financial stuff, no. It's just a math exercise.
Then that was my next question. It doesn't impact our bottom line at all at the municipality. No. All right. Help a fella understand like the why, because that's where I struggle the most. I don't understand. I described it as like Monopoly night at home, because we decide we want to play Monopoly, so we fight and we gnash our teeth and we get very angry with each other. We all go to bed mad, and then at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because it's not changing our bottom line. There's no benefit to the municipality. And on both sides, I see the arguments, like table 10, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, it shows me that the farmland weighted assessment has gone up 5.6%. So that lends credence to the idea that the farm share is going up, and I believe that's what the KFA said, that over the last 10 years, the farm share has gone up. That's a very good argument, and one that I have a tendency to follow along with. A question I sent you, and I'm hoping you can clear it up. It's hard to peg what the average farm is, right? Or what the assessment is.
That's right. There's no arithmetic average like there is for a residential property, where we can take the average house and tell you the average house is worth $200,000, because there's so many variables in terms of a farm. So when we do this, we have to use some assumptions. If you assume a 50-acre farm or a 100-acre farm, and then you have to assume the assessment per acre.
Right. Yeah, it's tricky with the feedback. There we go. How about for the average commercial or industrial? Can you math that one out?
I had another question today that's along those lines. Somebody asked me I gave the same example of a 100-acre farm with $15,000 per acre. We calculated the final tax bill for that farm in Dover Township. So, and it was, the numbers exactly. It was $7,223. A similar commercial or industrial property valued at $1.5 million would be about $54,000 to $56,000.
Okay, and what would the tax savings then be then if we raised the farm rate up? Can somebody do that math real quick for me?
It's in the report. Just give me a second.
Was it in the report on that number? Because if it was, I did miss it.
Table 7. So for every the impact per $100,000 of residential assessment would save $7, and a commercial would save.
So
$14.
on a $1.5 million commercial venture, it would save 14 times 15? 150.
Right.
Okay. So a couple $100s. See, that's kind of what I'm talking about. A $1.5 million commercial venture is going to save a couple $100. Like, we make decisions around this council table that have far broader impacts to everybody, to farmers, to residents, to businesses, commercial or industrial, and we get caught up on this for some reason every couple of years. And until I hear that there's been meaningful engagement, until I hear there is a reason to go through this much strife and this much disagreement in the community, I have a hard time supporting this shift. I really do, and I think we need more community engagement, and I think we need to have tougher conversations at budget, and I think a lot of things, truth be told, and here's what I know. I can't support what's being presented this evening for those reasons. I can't pick, some businesses are doing well. Some businesses aren't. Some farms are doing well. Some farms aren't. Some homeowners are doing well, and I can't pick winners and losers like this. Thank you.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Worship. I don't think I could add much more as to what the two previous councillors have said. My question is, you've stated a farm in Dover was $7,200 roughly for the taxes just on the farmland.
Excuse me. That included an assumption that there was a $200,000 assessed residential property on it as well.
Okay, that was my next question. I think I sent that to you. Okay, you answered my question then. Thank you.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I guess just growing up on a small family-run, like 300-acre farm, small compared to nowadays what farmers are farming. Like to make it nowadays, you've got to have thousands of acres of farm, and those mom and pop farms that I grew up on are becoming fewer and farther between because you can't afford it because they're getting priced out. So for us to raise this, especially before the community involvement and the impact comes out, I feel like that's just going to hurt the more family-run mom and pop farms that we have left. So for that reason and many others, I can't support this.
Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'm going to keep my comments rather short as well. Being a Ward 2 councillor, it's definitely a difficult decision. Councillor Thompson and myself, the last 4 years, the prior term, there was a lot of conversations for certain residents about this. It's a very weighted conversation, and it's very difficult to process because there is effects on each of the groups. I guess my comment is, like I said, keep it rather short, is the fact that as a municipal councillor, there's a lot of things that are transpiring in the agriculture community that we are unable to really have any effect on. But one thing I hear on a larger note is the challenging ability for our agriculture community to compete against just people across the border with the fees that they don't have. So the reason why I can't support it, I do understand why some councillors would certainly entertain it. I do understand why some community members would bring it to their counselor. The reason why I can't support it, though, is the fact that if we are able to make small changes like we did quite some time ago to better affect the agriculture community, to help them compete, even if it's the smallest margin, I have to continue to support that, because the challenges we see regarding input, chemical costs, fertilizer costs, things that aren't being charged over the border, who are our farmers' direct competition. This time I just cannot support it, and some of the other councillors made some comments similar to myself, but do appreciate why the conversation would happen, but at this time I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Pinsino, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Worship. I agree we didn't follow our own policies and procedures on this one, and it seems like it's being rushed in. Personally, I think we had it right last term of council. We made it that where it couldn't be brought forward again until the property assessment did come in. However, all rules change once the new council comes in. As it was said earlier, the ag community is hit hard with input costs, and that's fuel, that's seed costs, that's fertilizer, that's everything. And it's easy to sit around here and raise taxes, but that does have an effect on their livelihoods. You have to look at the ripple effect this is going to have too. You're going to see somebody's got to pay for it. You're going to see prices go up at the grocery store, at the farm markets, everything. It's all, it goes hand in hand, and it truly will be a ripple effect. Ag is now the biggest industry we have in Chatham-Kent, and I really do think we got to start showing a little bit of love here to keep them healthy. I can't support this, and I just think, honestly, I think we had it right last year, or last term. Push this off until we get an assessment. Thank you.
Councillor Wright, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. 50% of our product from our farmers that are grown in Chatham-Kent here is sold through the Chicago markets. The other 50% stays local. When it stays local, a lot of the corn and that goes into our ethanol plant, so it affects the price of our gas. All the food at the food markets or grocery stores, everything that stays local is affected by the cost that a farmer will pass on. A farmer is no different than our council here. We have an increase, we increase it to the taxpayer. A farmer has an increase, he's going to pass it on to the consumer, which is food and gas. So we might save the residents some, but they're going to pay more on the other side. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I think it's an interesting conversation, and I think it's also important to note that we're able to have this conversation, and we actually have to have this conversation annually. So it is something that's revisited as a policy every year. So, when we kind of throw back onto staff that maybe consultation wasn't what we would have preferred, this is actually a set annual exercise that this tax policy comes up and we can see alterations. So we've seen recommendations of it increasing in the past where we've chosen not to. I think that was last year or 2 years ago. We've seen, some provincial direction that multi-residential ratios had to be changed. So we passed that annually. So I think to talk about it as a one-off, it is actually, we have to pass something tonight because you have to set tax policy every year. So there is always an opportunity to alter those ratios, respecting economic realities and expecting when eventually reassessment ever happens, if it does, the impact that will have. A little unlike Councillor Doyle, I too grew up on a small farm, but a 65-acre farm. So I think it actually qualifies as small. So I certainly understand from my history and the phone calls that I get from people that I grew up with, the type of impact this has. And I think it's also really important to note that the reason we have these conversations municipally is because we're your most accessible form of government. So when we look at the impact that something like this has on a bottom line, and I think maybe you have the number, for that $1.5 million assessed farm in Dover, what would that change equate to in an annual tax amount?
Sorry, thank you, Mayor Caniff. It was a $183 increase on the farm side and an $18 decrease on the residential side
Right.
for a net increase of $165.
So net increase $165. So I think it's important to kind of note that's what we are talking about, and that impacts that we've heard about, like fertilizer tariffs and senior government policy, has a much greater impact on farmers and farm businesses, and that we certainly have a role to advocate in some of those issues as well. And when we talk about supporting ag business in our community, it's about much more than tax ratios. It's about those senior level government funding programs. It's about tariffs. It's about the way as a society we regulate farming. One thing that I wanted to maybe back out and talk a little bit about is how we got here. So we've had this discussion every year for as long as I've been here, and we've talked a little bit about infrastructure spending and inflation on construction and the challenge of low density and how we compare to two-tier municipalities and what our OMPF funding looks like and what our OCIF funding looks like and how provincial government policy affects our ability to pay. I was only 13 when it happened, but in that 1998 change, how did we fund bridges and rural roads and, Highway 3 before 1998? How was that work undertaken? Who shouldered the burden, that financial burden?
Thank you, Mayor Kierna. So prior to 1998, and some of this had to do with amalgamation, but some of it just had to do with provincial downloading across, not to do with Chatham-Kent's amalgamation. But Highway 2 and Highway 3 were provincial highways, Highway 21. So that was downloaded to the municipality. Also, prior to 1998, there were grant programs available to the townships to build the bridges specifically, where 90% grants would be received by the from the provincial government to the townships to help build those. All that went away around 1998 and 1999 as well. And so it just costs a lot more. It's a political decision on whether you want those rural costs paid for by all taxpayers, urban as well. That's why this decision is a political decision each year. The province sets the maximum. The maximum is 25%, but they do leave it up to municipalities to weigh the local issues on how to get that balance right. I think what's most important about the history part is the reasons that the councils in 2003, 4, 5, 6 lowered the tax ratios in the first place was because of commodity prices. Corn was $2 a bushel, and soybeans were $7, $8 a bushel, and so what that council failed to do was say, well, at what conditions does it go back to the 25%? You also had MPAC at the time back then doing a 2-decade catch-up on farm assessment values. So, but by the way, in case you don't all know, I've come from a farm family too. So, but farms, just from personal experience, you had farms that were still just assessed at $1,000 to $2,000 an acre that were selling to for $10,000 an acre back then. Those might be selling for $25,000 an acre now, but so we've been MPAC has been catching up. They caught up again in 2016. That was then phased in over the 4 years, from 2017 to 2021. So that's why you see that chart that was shown in one of the deputations today continue to go up from 2017 to 2020, then level off. But now we're dealing with 2016 numbers, not just with farms, but also with commercial properties that we know have gone way up in Chatham-Kent, houses and industrial properties. Everything has changed. But I guess why I have the floor. The other thing is that we hoped that there was going to be a 2024 reassessment cycle. That hope is fading every day because we assumed there was going to be an announcement in the provincial budget. It is not MPAC that controls the the assessment cycle. It is the provincial government that authorizes impact to move forward. And there has been no news lately, so we don't know if that will be 25, 26, 27 by time that's re-implemented. So just wanted council to be fully aware of that, because it may not be that we're just waiting one more year to have the data. We might be waiting till next term of council to have the data.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to note, and I know a lot of other communities, for other reasons, are really anxious to see that MPAC reassessment completed. And I think it's really important to note that that's a provincial decision. And I think as accessible as we are as municipal politicians, we need to make sure we're being loud to provincial politicians around that MPAC side. I know AMO is, I know other groups are. And I think it's also important to note that that hole left in funding, largely for rural infrastructure, was really only filled in by, I think it's, 10 million or so dollars a year in provincial funding, which pales in comparison to the requirement and to, in corrected dollars to what was provided before. I think I can remember who was in power for that government as well. So I think that as important as it is to make decisions that support agriculture around this table, and as appreciated as that input is from our different farm groups, we need to make sure that that advocacy is going to the voices and decision makers that are really impacting that industry. So, I share some of Councillor Thompson's frustration, when we're talking about a few dollars here versus there, and when we're thinking about commercial properties and farm properties and residences and multi-use residential. But these big, huge decisions that are actually having bottom line impact, we need to be advocating to the right people. So I think that when we talk about, as Councillor Pinsino says and Councillor Wright say, that we need to really be on board in supporting agriculture, to me, that's what that looks like. And I think that's a challenge for us to do that more. And I think that's also a challenge to advocates in the community to make sure that direction is taken as well. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Councillor Jubenville, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. It was suggested that, I'm just going to echo Councillor McGrail, it was suggested the farm stakeholders were contacted for consultation, but unfortunately I've heard incorrect email addresses were used. Most of the information was not received in a timely manner by our farmers for them to have any proper consultation. So did we get the email situation sorted out?
Thank you, Councillor. There was an issue with the email. One in particular, the contact information on their website was incorrect. This is the avenues I've used in the past. I go to their website, I know who the president is, email them. We've done this in the past several times. I did receive a phone call, both from the KFA and from the Christian farmers on Friday, indicating that they had not received it. So we did have a discussion about the issues, but you are correct. There were some issues with the emails.
Sorry, but you have them now moving forward,
yep.
So you have the correct contact information?
Yes.
Okay, so that's good. Just echoing, I do feel for our farmers. They haven't experienced many increases. Fertilizer has increased 5 times. Because of import tariffs, their equipment prices have doubled, and they continue to be taxed excessively on fuel. And I just feel for the approximate $15 to $20 in tax savings that our residents, like residential properties, will get, I feel the average taxpayer will accept the minimal extra money that they would get, and they would sacrifice that to support our farmers, which we should feel indebted to for feeding our families. While I respect Councillor Anderson's attempt to level off our tax ratio, I do feel that we should wait for the MPAC assessments before we impose any increases. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Maybe I'm follow up with the conversation about the MPAC assessment. I know it's been brought up a lot, but I know it got brought up in one of the deputations about, not having that new assessment numbers, doesn't give us the proper amount of information, I guess, to make a decision tonight. So I guess my question to Gord or Matt, can you just speak to that? Do you feel that we have the information that we need to, support Councillor Anderson's motion?
Thank you, Councillor. I think there seems to be a bit of a narrative that our recommendation is to offset an anticipated increase in residential assessment more than what the farm assessment will be. So we're expecting a shift to residential, and we're going to use this as an avenue to offset some of that. In fact, it's more in line with, we haven't made these recommendations between 2012 and 2020 because we knew there was already a shift to farms because of the property value increases over those two MPAC assessment cycles. So we held off until that phase-in had completed in 2020, and that's why we came with our first recommendation in 2021, because there was no longer a phase-in in addition to an increase in the farm tax ratio. So, well, I agree that the MPAC data would provide more information, and more information is obviously better. The reason that we held off until 2021 is to wait out that 8-year phase-in where farms, I believe, doubled in value.
Okay, thank you. And following up to that, I guess, you know, I know we're, you know, I was going to ask about the history, but I think you've answered that and why it's at 22% now. And you mentioned just now that, you know, it was a recommendation, I think it was in 2021, to phase it up to 25%. So is that, you know, I know this is an amendment, I guess, by Councillor Anderson. It wasn't necessarily a recommendation, but it's on our table tonight. But is that logic still there in your administration's view to increase the farm tax ratio?
Thank you, Councillor. We support getting a phased approach. We support a phased approach. We don't support going right to the 25, but one step in the right direction in our view is better than the current 0.22.
Right. Thank you. And I think you've spoken about this, but maybe I'll just question for clarification. So you mentioned, you know, what does this increase? And I guess maybe to speak to like a phase-in. How does this impact, you know, an average farm, an average home in Chatham-Kent?
So I'll refer back to those same figures. So it's difficult to come up with what an average farm is. So we used for our case study example, a 100-acre farm in Dover Township with a $200,000 residential assessment on it, and the impact was an increase of $165. And then on the residential side, again, it's going to depend on houses vary in size, but it's $7 per 100,000 of assessment. So we're probably not far off from $200,000 average assessment. So it'd save about $14 per average residential property, and double that for commercial.
All right, thanks for the information, Matt. Gord. Thanks, Mayor Kenneth.
Okay, seeing no other, Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just more of a comment than a question. I think I'm the only guy here that didn't grow up on a farm, but I didn't, like, at all. But in the last little while, I've spent a lot of time at a horse farm. Not agriculturally farming, but riding horses, right? And I was going to support this motion because I thought, well, it only seems fair. So I just asked some questions out there. And again, it's not agricultural, it's equestrian. But yeah, the costs have really increased for equipment costs, fuel. And of course, I didn't know. To me, it's status quo. It's a farm. You know, if you drive by TJ Stables, it pretty well looks the same as it has in 25 years. But the dynamics of the business there has really changed. And they face a lot of the challenges that I don't know that they did years ago. So after, frankly, coming in here tonight, I was going to support this, but after listening to all this talk about the challenges that farmers are facing, and as a very proudly known Cidiot guy out there, I've learned a lot. And the challenges at these farms are something that I don't know that like a city guy like me really understood until spending some time there and listening tonight. So that's that. So I won't support it. Not to say I wouldn't in the future, but maybe now is not the right time. So thanks.
Okay, with that, no other questions. I think we've had virtually everyone speak. We'll vote on item number 5. The clerk would like to vote on 5 first, because if, depending on the outcome of that, there's slight wording changes to to item 6, I believe. So with that, we're going to vote on item 5. The farm class transition ratio be increased from 22 to 23%. That was what we're voting on here. Just to be clear. Will that go on the screen just so?
We'll just say we're voting on just the number 5 that's up there.
Is everybody clear? We're voting on number 5. Okay. Read number 5. Going once, going twice. Okay. We'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion is defeated 10-7. Yep, everything stays the same. The only word changed to number 6. We took out the word other. So now it's just all 2023 tax ratio policies remain unchanged from 2022.
Mr. Mayor, it's Gord. Hi. Just wanted to note before you vote on this that we'll revert number 7, the bylaw that's referring to, back to the 22% that was on the bylaw that was presented at the last meeting. Just when we go to approving the bylaws, there's that change, because the one that's on tonight's agenda is at 23%. So we will be substituting it back to the 22% bylaw.
Perfect. All right, we'll vote on 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-0.
With that, is everyone to stay for the rest of it, or I give everybody a minute if they want to leave? I'm not seeing anybody getting up, so we'll assume you want to stick around for the rest of the meeting. All right.
We could say thank you.
Item 18B, motion by Councillor Sakachi regarding purchasing process review.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Scotchy.
Do I need to reread the motion, Mayor Caniff? Yeah, thought so.
Yes, please.
Where it is important that a regular review of processes used by the municipality occur to ensure consistency with best practice in the public sector, and whereas public purchasing processes can be difficult for smaller businesses who do not have dedicated staff for submitting bids and have other pressures on their business. Now therefore, be it resolved, the administration take the following steps and return to council with a report underlining recommended or optional changes to council to streamline purchasing processes and to reflect best practices of other municipalities and public sector agencies. 1, produce a summary of processes that are in place or could be added to address the submission of non-compliant bids. 2, produce helpful documentations for bidders to avoid common pitfalls that can result in non-compliant bids to be included in the tenders where any significant non-compliance has been noticed in previously released tenders. And 3, provide options for council on implementing more active contract assessment management approaches, including costing.
Okay, Councillor Doyle, you wanted to second that, but you wanted to add something at number 4?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Caniff. I would like to do a friendly amendment to that one and add a number 4. So number 4 would read, a review of other municipal bylaws or other government purchasing approaches to determine if there are any process changes or best practices that can be implemented in Chatham-Kent to reduce non-compliant bids, including considering any adjustments that can be made to minor irregularities that can be corrected by bidders.
Councillor Scotch, are you good with that amendment?
It's a friendly amendment, Mayor Caniff.
Okay. Councillor Scotch, anything to add?
I wanted to thank Mr. Taylor for a significant amount of time and some discussions, and that is all. No comments on the actual motion.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-0. Our next item is item 18C, land acquisition for 495 Wallace Street in Wallaceburg.
Councillor Hall and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to move this, please?
Happy to move, Mayor Caniff.
And seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 16-0.
Item 19, Community Human Services.
19B, municipal summer camp fees.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Bree McGregor, can I just move this, please?
Mayor Caniff, I had a modified recommendation that I sent based on this report that I'd like to move if possible. It's that current municipal summer camp fees remain unchanged, with any resulting deficit being included in this year's corporate variance, and that future rate increases are included in the multi-year budget process along with other municipal user fees.
Councillor Anderson, will you second that? Okay.
So seconded.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward motion, so what I'm looking for, oh, sorry. Sorry, I thought someone said something. It's fairly straightforward motion, looking to freeze that proposed increase, understanding this is a particularly difficult year on household budgets with inflation where it is, and I know that these camps are a really important tool for childcare during the 8-week school break in the summer. And I do think that we have an opportunity to complex this in with how we review other user fees like baseball diamond rental, per player fees, and we've typically done that around budget time. And I think with the 4-year budget, we have an opportunity to look at doing this in a way that gives families and users some cost certainty over time. So I think that that's the most prudent way to do it. I do certainly understand that there's, financial impacts to doing that, and that, we really do deliver fantastic camps at what is a really affordable price, and there are pressures to doing that. There's staff costs, there's training costs, programming costs. So certainly, I definitely believe the quality and importance is there, and I'm not suggesting that we should keep the costs low because of quality, but we really do need to be mindful of access, and that even though there is programming for low-income families and individuals to access some funding to access camps, there are many families who wouldn't be eligible for that type of programming that still benefit from a low-cost camp option. So appreciate Council's hopeful support on this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, anything to add?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback off what Brock has said, we just had a significant tax increase for our taxpayers, and these camps may be the only opportunity that children have this summer to get some recreation in. I know they do all sorts of recreational sports with the kids during the day, and the increase in costs may not allow families to be able to send their kids there. So, which may be the only recreational club that they can join. So, I'm happy to support Brock's motion.
Councillor Finn.
Just one question for clarification. So we're gonna run the programming, I take it, as if they got the increase, and then there's not gonna be anything changed or affected?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. We are running those programs at a deficit already, and we make that cost up in some cost recovery programs later in the year. So we will run the program the same way, and we will probably run in a deficit this year by the end of the year budget.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-0.
Item 20, Infrastructure and Engineering Services.
Item 20B, motion by Councillor C. McGregor regarding rental of 2 mini excavators.
Councillor C. McGregor.
You asking if I want to move that?
No, it's over. You might consider moving it.
Okay. Did you want to get a seconder before I go ahead or not?
You can read it first, and then we'll.
Okay.
Councillor Hall will be happy to second it, I'm sure.
Sure. That fleet management be directed to rent 2 mini excavators for the remainder of 2023, one for the south and one for the north of the municipality for shared use between cemetery operations and public works, and that the purchase of 2 mini excavators be forwarded to the next budget deliberations to be added to the municipal fleet complement.
Councillor Hall, will you second that?
So seconded.
Okay.
Thank you, and through the mayor. I think we had some fairly lengthy discussion at the last meeting. We were provided an absolutely excellent report on cemeteries and the works within our cemeteries from our Carl Marting, I'm thinking, and under Rob Pollock's division. The reason for this is we have had and at least numerous, and certainly in our area, we've had lots of complaints of the damage in the cemeteries caused by the bulldozers. I hope that each of you had at some point, maybe during supper, had the opportunity to look at the delegations. We received a delegation with pictures from the president of the Wallaceburg Legion and showing the damage that was caused between knocked over tombstones and the ruts that run across grave sites and everything. It's very disturbing for community members when they go to take care of a cemetery plot or to visit a loved one, and when they get there, there is further damage that is being caused by the larger bulldozers. My ask is that they be rented at this point of time, so it still allows for council to determine through advice from administration how much these were able to be used. I have been assured that Public Works would be able to utilize them. I know at the last meeting there was a bit of a concern wanting to know the cost and the fact that there was trailer and such. I have been also assured that the Mini X would be rented, or if bought would come with trailers. And I know that it would still be work of Public Works that would go and utilize these, as our cemeteries currently do not have staff with the tickets to run these machines, which they did in the past. In the past, they had these at their access at the cemeteries to be able to do the work. So I would just ask that everybody consider this and possibly support this. It'll give us the perfect opportunity to learn if this really will be of great assistance in the cemeteries, and that we can maybe better take care of the cemeteries and the plots, and possibly even boulevard work and such that the Public Works would use throughout the year as they share the units. I thought it at the cost of renting for 1 year, certainly while we're seeing and having one in the north and south, it would be very difficult to be running one from Wheatley through to Wallaceburg, or to make it much easier for the Public Works to be able to utilize to help better assist and better take care of our cemeteries within the municipality. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Until about a week ago, I didn't plan on speaking on this one, but I did have some past members of Public Works and Cemeteries that actually approached me on this one, and they kind of touched base with me. One had 40 years experience and indicated some of the challenges that also incorporate running a Mini X in a cemetery, getting over stones, as well as the fact that they might not eliminate what we're seeing. So I'm not an expert, so I can, Mr. Soldo, you can comment on that. I guess what I would like to see on this motion, though, for sure, is that there be an A and B, or a 1 and 2, sorry, just because of the fact that, renting one and budget consideration, I feel is two different aspects. And the other part is that I have no idea when it comes to the rental portion, what the cost is going to be associated with it, what the budget request is going to be, like how much the variance going to be. Are we talking something that's a few $1,000s here, 10,000? Like, I have no idea, Mr. Soldo, so I just don't want to make a decision based on no information whatsoever on costs. So I'm just hoping that you can maybe brief me on a couple of those points.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor, for the question. In terms of the rental costs and the capital costs, I've had the opportunity since our last meeting to talk to staff in Public Works, staff in cemeteries, as well as staff in fleet. I would propose or request that this item may be deferred back to staff so we can provide you with a more fulsome report with operating costs, rental costs, and the longer-term capital costs. At this point, doing a very quick sort of analysis in terms of rental costs, it's about $150,000 for the remainder of the year, which is not insignificant. What I'd like to do is come back to council with that more fulsome report so that you can have all that information when you're making your decision on this. We could strive to come back on the 29th of May, which is about a month away from now, and that will still give us time to rent the vehicle if it's desired by council for the rest of the year.
Thank you. My last question would be to you as well as that, I know, I'm not wanting to put you on the spot, and maybe that's your way of indicating it would be beneficial for that report to come back. But because this is going to be your asset, and really, I think it's important to get your opinion. And like I said, I do apologize for putting you on the spot, but is this like a municipal asset that you feel that we require for your team to do their job better, or do you feel that it's going to be an underutilized piece of equipment?
And speaking through the mayor to the councillor, thank you for that question. In speaking with staff, what we want to do is make sure when we come back that we come back to you with a plan in place on how to use the vehicle that's going to maximize its utilization rate, that it's not being underutilized. It will require moving the vehicle around quite a bit. It will require the different pieces of equipment. I would say to you at this point, in speaking with staff, there might be some instances where Public Works could utilize that mini excavator, but the utilization rate overall probably wouldn't be used for the majority of the time. That's the early indication I'm getting from staff. Between use in cemeteries and use in Public Works, the utilization rate wouldn't be that high, given that we would have two of them. So I'd like to take that back and flush that utilization out a little bit more with staff. And then in terms of the rental, I also want to review how would we go about renting this equipment. Right now, you can't rent it by the hour. You realistically going to have to rent it full time as we kind of move forward. So I think there's a little bit more work on our part to be done here in terms of understanding how we'd utilize that equipment and what those costs are.
So I guess I can't support it how it's wrote now. I guess is Councilor McGregor okay for this to come back with more information, Councilor McGregor, or is this? I understand why you've had a lot of concerns and why you want to address it, and I know you're very passionate about your community. So I just wanted to see if if it's something that you would consider.
Actually, I think that was the reason that it was to be forwarded to the budget consultation. I thought it would be a perfect opportunity this year to see how well it's utilized before we get to the budget season, to be able to determine the value that it could be. So if we put it off another month, I guess, it could go off another month. If that's what it's going to take, I'd rather hear from other councillors to see if that's what it needs, because honestly, I think the longer we leave it, then it'll be not being able to find it. And I think there were a few opportunities within the past couple of weeks that we could have found some information. If we can certainly reach out to our community to get input back on a tax decision within 2 weeks, we certainly could have had the opportunity to have the cost of this particular item back in place also. So I'm not really comfortable about doing that because, this is another month off, and I think it is a good test pilot for our cemeteries. Each of you have had the opportunity to see the pictures and the destruction in the cemetery, and I don't think the size difference. And I think when I was talking to the cemetery. And actually, I don't know, do we have Colin here or Rob? Are you able to maybe answer, and I don't know if you have this information, the number of burials we would have within Chatham-Kent within a year? Like even if it wasn't utilized as often with Public Works, like it was my understanding that it was well in the hundreds of burials that take place within the municipality in a year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rob Pollock, Director of Parks, Fleet, and Facilities. We average about one full burial a day amongst all of our active cemeteries.
Okay,
So, yeah,
so 365, so,
working days. So
Working days,
it's
okay.
actually 256.
okay.
It
that's
averages
still-
out to
that's
one
still-
working
That's
day.
still a lot of utilization, far as I'm concerned, within our cemeteries, so, you know, I guess if it fails, and it fails, I'll bring it back at budget time, but I certainly feel that it needs to, that we need to get these and have the ability to look at the utilization and to see if it brings down the complaints within the cemeteries and go with it there, so no, not comfortable.
Respect your point, just, if it's possible, I would like to see a 1 and 2, please.
He wants it, he would like it split, so.
The rental one,
rental
because
and
I have no
one's
cost
go to
associated with that, separated from the budget portion, because I feel they're two different, they technically are two different matters.
Councillor Pincinel?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to stop conversation on this, but I would like to refer it all back. I had the concerns with the costs as well, and whether we actually need it or not, and I guess the equipment costs are going up in every division we have tremendously, and we got to know what this is going to cost before we can say yes or no. But I don't want to stop conversation, but I will move to defer this back to, for
Is there
more
a second
information.
for deferral of this?
But I don't want to stop conversation. If anybody else wants to speak on it.
Councillor Wright. Okay, so we'll move in there. So we just take questions on the deferral aspect.
That's not what I wanted to do, though. I'll do that after.
But
Let
I
everybody
think
speak.
you were the last
Okay, all right.
speaker on this.
Okay.
So. Okay, Councillor Wright, would you like to discuss the?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I talked to Mr. Marling today, and he indicated to me that the cemetery people had not requested this. And the other thing he indicated, that these mini excavators cannot be used in the wintertime because they can't break up the frozen ground. Did I hear you say the cost of rental could be $150,000 a year, Mr. Sulo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor, for the question. The cost for 8 months for the rest of the year would be about $150,000.
Is that not the cost of a backhoe? Pretty well the cost of a backhoe?
Thank you, through the Mayor, to the Councillor. Our preliminary estimate for a 2 mini excavators, including the 2 trailers, would be just under $300,000. And then we'd have to add in the life cycle costs as well for both of those.
My point is here, we're buying backhoes for a little over $150,000 and we're getting 12, 14 years out of them. And we're gonna pay rent for 1 year. It seems like a lot of money there. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions regarding the deferral? Sorry, I'll go to Councillor C. McGregor and then over to Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just look for clarification? Maybe it's through Meredith. So the
Sorry,
deferral.
I was going to Councillor C.
yeah.
McGregor first.
Since we didn't discuss deferral and we talked again about the motion, I need to understand, is it $150,000 for the rental? I was led to believe that that was more the cost of the purchase and the rental was much lower than that for the season.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. This is the information I was provided by our manager of fleet. It's $148,000 for 8 months of the year for rental.
Okay, Councillor Scotchy?
Yeah, I'm just looking for clarification on deferral. Like I understand Councillor McGregor's want to get this addressed somewhat, promptly. So I'm just concerned that, like, I did want to see it come back with numbers, but we're referring it back for how long, I guess. I thought that May was reasonable, but are we referring, I'm not, just a budget time, like what's this date gonna be? Are you gonna bring this back relatively soon? Just looking at the referral, like the potential date, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. Our goal will be to come back on the May 29th meeting of council with a report on the costs.
Any other questions regarding that? Okay, seeing that, we'll be voting on the referred back to come back on, we need to put that on May 29th meeting. Okay, with that, we'll put this to vote.
All votes are in and the motion passes 14-3.
Item 21, corporate services.
21A, motion by Councillor Juvenville, reflags at Chatham-Kent Municipal Centers.
Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor. My motion reads, whereas there are 3 flagpoles in front of Chatham-Kent Civic Center at 315 King Street West that regularly fly the Canadian national flag, the Ontario provincial flag, and the Chatham-Kent municipal flag. And whereas there are flagpoles in front of other Chatham-Kent Municipal Service Center buildings across Chatham-Kent. And whereas in some circumstances, other flags representing different organizations, groups, or movements have flown under the direction of the Chatham-Kent Mayor's office. And whereas some organizations, groups, or movements have not been afforded the opportunity to also have their representing flag flown. Therefore, be it resolved that council direct administration to avoid controversy and discrimination while encouraging inclusion of all Chatham-Kent residents under the federal, provincial, and municipal flags by stating the only flags that shall be flown at the Chatham-Kent Civic Center and all municipal service centers across Chatham-Kent will be the Canadian national flag, the Ontario provincial flag, and the Chatham-Kent municipal flag.
Councillor Bondi, you want to second that?
Sure, Mayor Kent, and I have an amendment that, sorry I didn't send in, but I talked to you earlier about something else I wanted to do, and that was kind of killed, so.
Okay, so you want to talk to, well.
I did.
But you want an amendment, Councillor Jubenville, do you want to hear the amendment before we move on?
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Bondi, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, because it might not be friendly, I don't know. So the amendment would be that any exception to the flag raising policy be the sole decision of council.
Councillor Jubenville, do you consider that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I do.
Can I speak to that briefly?
I'll go to Councillor Jubenville to talk about her motion, and then we'll go to you.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I would like to thank all those who came tonight to deliver deputations in person, both against and in favor of my motion. As many of you know or may not know, this motion regarding flags was brought forward, in my opinion, because of discrimination to one group that represents thousands of people across Chatham-Kent. Personally, I feel no special interest group should be the recipient of discrimination, and it would have been wonderful to see all special interest flags fly, unless, of course, it is a group that incites violence, hate, or fear. Unfortunately, here we are. I am perplexed by those who advocate for their own flag, or those who advocate for inclusion do so with little to no regard for other groups. While trying to be inclusive, we are actually perpetuating division. While most of the special interest flags advocate for wonderful organizations that are worthy of spreading a purposeful message, why do they need a municipal flagpole to do so? To be fully transparent, I've received hateful messages, and I actually received a hateful letter on my desk tonight as I walked in, and emails. I have been called words that I had to look up the meaning of. I've had 2 wishes of death and a witch's spell cast on me, all because I feel our 3 governmental flags are what is needed outside of municipal centers. These hateful messages all sadly come from groups of people who preach inclusivity. Now, while I have also received emails and messages in opposition to my motion that were very respectful and thought-provoking, why would I now, as a councillor, feel compelled to support some of these groups that wish me death and hate over a flag? This should concern all of council. While I did receive some disheartening messages, I have also received a plethora of support from thousands across CK. To my fellow councillors, I hope you realize there are more constituents in favor of this motion than against it. I have the emails, messages, and letters to prove it, as do most of you. I also want to thank those constituents who have held me up in prayer against the wrongful and hateful words against me. Some of these words cast against me are from people sitting in these council chambers, and that saddens me to say. Just to clarify, for public record, I am not anti-Black, I am not racist, and I am not anti-LGBTQ+. I know and love many people in all of these communities. Some people are advocating for a flag-raising policy. In theory, this seems okay, but again, the decision-making will be put in the hands of administration and enforced arbitrarily. The flag needs to be decided by council, who were elected by the good people of Chatham-Kent. The flags represent Chatham-Kent residents, so they need to be decided upon by the people who were elected by the constituents of Chatham-Kent. If that can't happen, a flag policy will not help us remedy this situation. The division created by some contentious flags is concerning. Nearby Norwich Township was witness to the burning and desecration of pride flags last June. Is this what we want to see happen here? I know I don't. Instead of dividing all of us into little groups that align with different flags, why don't we all align with each other under the 3 flags that represent who we really are? Canadians, Ontarians, and Chatham-Kent residents, instead of fighting amongst ourselves over what flag is worthy of flying and what flag isn't. My motion was intended to bring all of us together, not create more division. Perhaps a councillor could make a motion to install a community flagpole near our municipal centers across Chatham-Kent. This flagpole would don the flags of every legitimate community organization that makes a request to have their flags flown. In closing, my intentions were not to silence any organization, but I feel our municipal flagpoles should represent all of us. Our municipal flagpoles should not be used as a platform for any organizations. We should remain nonpartisan, unbiased, and impartial. We should not be used to promote the ideals, rights, or political views of any organizations, as we must remain cognizant that not all Chatham-Kent residents align with all special interest flags. It is not the municipality's role to promote or mandate these said groups. As the motion goes to vote, I do hope my fellow councillors have listened to their constituents. After speaking to our Municipal Integrity Commissioner today, she reminded me that many municipalities across Ontario have a similar policy where only the governmental flags are flown. As always, after council has decided on the direction of what we will proceed on this issue, I will, as always, respect and uphold the democratic process. Thank you.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I won't be nearly as smooth as that, as I don't have anything written out. So my amendment, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, would sort of, give this a little bit of room, right? So the amendment would allow for an exception. Basically what I'm trying to do with that is to not have council kick this back to administration and say, come up with a policy that would be instituted by administration. Maybe we would approve it, maybe it would just happen. Something's got to happen because, as we all know, when this first came up, we received a email from Mr. Dubin explaining that this decision was the mayor's office, not necessarily the mayor, but the mayor's office decision whether a flag would go up or down. And then I read in the paper that the mayor said, no, it's actually a senior administration decision. So I don't know if we have a policy at the moment or if it just happens or not. So that's where we are. That's how we got here. Now, speaking to my amendment, I think that there should be the ability for an exception. The Royal Canadian Legion, for instance, obviously, you know, I think that's a kind of the number one no-brainer. Terry Fox, you know, these are flags that I think everybody probably agrees upon. And if we are to have an exception, then I think it would come to council. A councilor would make a motion for an exception, then council would make that decision, and then we all wear it. If it's for a pride flag or if it's for Terry Fox, we vote on it. And we were elected to make these decisions. And I think it's fair on all sides that the 3 governmental flags fly sort of predominantly, but not perpetually. And if we're to make an exception, then we make the exception, the people that were elected. Not leaving it into the hands of administration because, you know, for as much as I'm sure they're good intention, this is something that's out in front of the municipality. It reflects, I would think, mayor and council, you know, for this term. So I just believe that this should be a council decision if there is to be any exceptions. And I know some will say, oh, well, I don't want to get into that. You know, as a councilor, I think we have to remind each other, you know, we're all getting paid about $36,000 a year to sit around here. And, you know, we're not here that often. So I'm okay to spend 15 minutes every now and again doing something like this. And we won't get silly flags like National Cupcake Day. I don't think any one of us is going to make a motion to raise a cupcake flag, right? So we're not going to get the silly stuff. We'll get things that people obviously feel are genuine and important enough and authentic enough to bring and use the time of council to promote. And it'll be voted upon. If it fails, it fails. The flag doesn't go up. If it passes, it passes. The flag goes up. Detail would be given as to the organization, how long the flag goes up on what day. And I think it's just fair. I think it calms this thing down a little bit. And again, I'll say it for the 20th time, it puts the decision back in the hands of council. And that's where I think it should be. And that's it. Thank you.
So I just need to clarify something. When I read this motion, it talks about not flying anything, that any exception to the flag raising policy. Right now, we don't have a flag raising policy. So how can we have an exception to it? That's why I just need to clarify how this flows.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Well, I would think if so my amendment would only apply if that passes, right? So that would be the policy. So my amendment would amend that, because that would become the policy, right? So my amendment would provide for an exception to that policy, correct?
Yeah, I think if the policy is the way it's written here, which is basically that the only flags that would be flown would be those 3, that is the policy. That's the direction to the organization, and that would be the only exception is if something comes to council. That's the way I read the motion.
Yeah, and that's about right. Like an exception would be if something came to council. So council would make the exception for whatever that may be.
I do want to remind council that we have a flag lowering policy, not to complicate things, but that has been approved by council. It's actually very much based on the federal approach to flag lowering. That still remains a policy that's in place. We can bring that forward after we deal with this tonight so that you can have a look at it. I think it's 2 very different things, but some people do sometimes confuse the 2. One is lowering, one is about basically, as you heard tonight, one is about recognizing different groups. So I just want you to be aware that there is a policy that deals with flag lowering. That has been approved by council. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got 3 speakers, other speakers, Councillor B. McGregor, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Finn. Is there anyone else that would, oh, sorry, and Councillor Crew. Yes, sorry, my writing here is a little, So I'll start with Councillor Crew and then Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I want to start by saying to Councillor Jubenville, I'm sorry for what you've gone through because that is unacceptable and unforgivable in this community, and everyone at this table are here to do work. Having said that, I'm not going to support your motion. But I got a message here from a 7-year-old. Her name's Violet, and she's in grade 1. And she says, I think that other flags should be allowed to fly because flags include people and show people that you love and care about them. I would feel sad not to see flags like the Pride flag or the Franco-Ontario flag or the Terry Fox flag flying, signed Violet. So I'm not going to support that, only because I believe that our community, and I know there's people that want the 3 flags, there's others that want community flags, but Mr. Mayor, if this fails, I have a motion that I would like you to come back to me to read. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thank you to Councillor Crew, and I look forward to hopefully the opportunity to vote on that motion. And I think that the prudent way forward is the direction other communities have taken when faced with a similar challenge, and adopting a policy that allows what is often a very important symbolic step for groups that have traditionally not been included in communities. There are moments when I'm really proud of our community, and I can think of a lot of them happened raising flags. The first time we raised the trans flag was a really powerful day in the community. I agree that it's unacceptable for anyone to receive messages of hate. There are other members around this horseshoe that have received those messages online. There are members of my family that have received those messages related to this. I'm sure there's members in this room that were brave enough to speak on this motion in support of groups like Pride and Black Lives Matter. And I think it's important that we reject those statements. And I think that we have a responsibility as municipal leaders to create and promote an inclusive community. And that word inclusive means something very specific. So inclusivity does not mean that you accept things like misogyny or homophobia or transphobia or anti-Black racism or anti-Indigenous racism. Accepting those viewpoints, providing platforms for them, whether it's a flagpole or an event on municipal property, is counter to inclusivity. And we need to understand that as a group. And neutrality is not something that you can espouse and a stance you can take in important issues where people have their safety at risk. And I think that when we make decisions like this, it would be easy to not say something, to let it go by, to take an easy approach, to just not have to deal with it. That's not why I ran for council. I don't think that's why anyone around here ran for council. And when I think of the people in this community that find these symbols important, I will support them in any way that I can. I will vote against this motion. I will vote for the motion that Councillor Crew brings. And I just want to say I'm very proud of many members of this community and the way that they've handled this issue. And I want them to know that you belong here. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everything that I would say has been said. Thank you.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, Worship. Wasn't going to speak on this one. I like the amendment that it comes back to council. I support every organization that has done a flag raising. I have family that have been involved with the organizations. I myself have been involved with it. Prior to 2004, I didn't even know Right to Life existed. I think a lot of people need to look at Right to Life or pro-life because there's a big misunderstanding as to what they do for this community. They support people in this community. I know firsthand because I walked through those doors in 2004, a single mom expecting twins. Had it not been for them, and they did not tell me I should go through this pregnancy, I needed to go through this. They did not push their views onto me. But had it not been for them, I wouldn't have had clothing. I wouldn't have had diapers. I wouldn't have had formula. They gave me coupons if I needed them. I was a single mom. I had a good job, but I had 4 kids now. I was not prepared for 2 because I found out at 23 weeks. So I think it's great, but we need to include them as well. And it hurt when I found out they were not even responded to. So I can understand why the motion came forward. I like council voting on it, maybe not, because there are organizations that already have their flag raisings already planned. I'd like to put a friendly amendment that it does come to council, that any that have been already approved, still approved, but maybe twice a year, if you're gonna do a flag raising between January and June, have them apply in December, have it come before the flag raising even starts in January. The same with between July and December. Have them come in June where it's voted on. Because some administration may not realize what an organization does. And I know hundreds and thousands of young moms and dads that have benefited from that program. So if I could make a friendly amendment that they do fly the other flags, but that it does get approved by council, and if already pre-approved, that they're allowed to go forward.
Councillor Jubenville, is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, it is.
Councillor Bondi? So how do we want this worded?
I do think we're getting a little too far down into the, like, the main policy is to only fly the 3 flags. Councillor Bondi's amendment would say that there can be exceptions, but it has to come to council for approval. Councillor Finn, I think what you're doing is just, it's expanding a little bit out of the scope of Councillor Jubenville's motion.
Yeah,
So if this motion passes as amended, we're gonna have to, although I appreciate that this is the policy, we're still gonna have to have a procedure in place, right? People are gonna call us, and in many cases, we don't have a lot of notice. And that's, I'm sure, happening in the mayor's office now, where, you know, we find out that next week is, you know, dig safely week or something like that. So we will have to have some sort of a procedure so that it does come to council. We generally, as administration, try not to bring too many things to you. I don't know if holus bolus is a word, I don't know if it's Latin, but hopefully I'll know what I mean by that. We try not to bring the same things over and over. So I fully expect that there would be a procedure in place so that we're not receiving these every week and then having to do a council report on it. I think the idea of having them come in, whether it's 2-3 times a year, something like that, is the only way we're gonna be able to process that. And I'd rather have one council report dealing with the 3, 4, 5 requests that we might get. So I guess what I'm saying is, could you leave at least the procedure part to the staff, keeping in mind that we don't want to be doing this every council meeting, and that we need notice so that you guys can do whatever stakeholder consultations you do to discharge your obligations. But we hear you. If this passes, there needs to be a procedure to support it, which is consistent with everything else we do. We try to lump things together, like planning reports, that sort of thing. So I anticipate we do exactly the same thing.
So, Councillor Finn, given the discussion, because I believe if we add that amendment, we're starting to get a lot closer to what we are doing right now, other than saying council has the say in what goes up and what doesn't.
if it could be that council direct administration as a friendly amendment to make a policy, whereas applications will be received and brought forth to council, instead of having where stating the only flags.
I did have this same conversation with Councillor Bondi earlier today, who emailed me about a similar amendment. And it does start to get contrary to Councillor Jubenville's motion. She said, these 3 flags and only these 3 flags. So if we start adding all these exceptions on, it starts to become contrary.
If she accepts the fact that we could remove by stating the only flags that shall be flown as a friendly amendment, to remove that part, would that be a friendly amendment?
That changes the motion
Oh,
completely,
okay.
Councillor Finn. So in my opinion, the amendment you're trying to put forward is contrary to Councillor Jubenville's motion and would not be accepted.
Okay, so we've got, I'm going, sorry, Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. I also want to thank all of people that reached out and the emails that came through. It is very passionate issue within our communities, and to all of our groups and within our community that celebrate by starting their celebrations with a flag raising within the municipality. I think where we're getting to right now, I think we're all kind of on the same page here at the table, but I think at this point it might be just cleaner if this fails and then Councillor Crew's motion comes back. That would allow administration to come up with a proper policy. There's some really good ones out there, like Ottawa and other things that some of our speakers have pointed out. But at that point in time, it also gives council the opportunity, if they want it to come back to council or things to come back to council, then that motion could be amended with the direction that a proper policy be set within the policy or within the municipality. The other part that concerns me if this goes through, in our community, we're due to be at a flag raising in another week. So what happens to that flag raising in another week? There isn't time to come back to council and ask to have a flag risen. So, I'm sure there's other flags that are due to be risen in the very, very near future that would not have the opportunity to come back and get proper approval by council. So, I think the intent's there. I understand Councillor Jubenville's intent, and it's very good. It's about equality. It's about giving everybody the right to be able to celebrate without discrimination from any sector of any group. So I just think at this point it would be much cleaner if this failed, or even if it was pulled, and that a motion come back that I know is intended, that would set proper policy for the municipality, and at that point, councillors will be able to decide if that's the proper policy or if there needs to be more council action within that selection at that point. So, thank you.
I guess so. I'm not against any of these flags that need to be risen. I think they all need to be risen. Again, I guess unless they're against hate or promote violence or that kind of type of thing. But correct me if I'm wrong, but would your motion, we would still approve the bylaw for the flags, but that would still put all of that in administration's hand to basically do everything, and we never vote on a flag again. So your motion would put all this back in the hands of administration, where Bondi's lets council vote on it. And I guess in my opinion, like you said, we're paid to make votes. I've made a lot of votes already that I did not want to make or do anything about. So if we were elected to make tough decisions like this, I think I am full support of this motion right there, that we're not going to deny all flags. We'll allow the flags, and as long as a councillor brings it to the table, then we vote on it. So that makes perfect sense to me, and then we still fly the flags.
So just my observation on this is as we go down, we're moving more towards inclusion of other flags subject to council. I really see the key component here is council wants ultimate determination of what goes up the flagpole. And that's what I'm hearing generally speaking. And we're trying to draft almost a policy on the, as we go through your amendments, Councillor Finn wanted to add that and saying, well, yeah, these, but it's starting to look like a lot like a policy. I mean, the thought would be is administration develop a policy knowing that council wants ultimate approval on this, and whether it's something to say here, these 30 are that we've done that nobody has, whatever it might be, but have a policy that we can look at and factor in everything that we've been hearing. That's because otherwise we're going to get some sort of policy based on this and this, and adding different things in, and then we're going to say, well, hang on here, what are the procedures? A policy coming back would be a lot more inclusive of the A to Z of how this happens. And as well, it can council can say, no, we want to approve every single flag that goes up there in the policy, and that's fine. But this then, by adding, like Councillor Finn was saying, well, no, but we'll put certain ones in here, we'll do this. So that's what I'm just trying to summarize the discussion as we've been hearing it to this point. So with this, I've got, I see no other questions, so I'll go to the mover and seconder for final comments. Councillor Jubenville, do you want to go first?
There's concern of flag raisings that are already on the schedule. So that would be a concern. Could we grandfather anything that is on the schedule that's already been, yes, like right now, if there's a flag raising on the schedule, let's leave it on the schedule. If there's already been a request put through and it's been granted by the mayor's office. And then beyond that, everything would fall under that motion there on the screen.
So you're looking at adding in grandfathering
Existing requests
existing requests.
that have already been approved.
Okay. Just that, there's a lot of them that
Yeah.
would consider perpetuity to say, we've
Right.
done it for 20 years now. Is
Right.
that grandfathering?
Right.
So we're going to get into that. I'm just trying to imagine the discussion that's going to happen
Yes.
there by putting that in grandfathering. Well, we're grandfathered.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councilor McGray, I did notice, sorry, I should have went to you because you did have your hand up earlier. I apologize.
I'm confused now completely because would that not supersede the original motion, grandfathering? So that's where, like, because we have a motion, right? And I'm trying to understand this, right? We have a motion, and now we're amending the motion that it's not even the motion anymore. So is there not a point of order here or something? Like, because it's gotten...
And that's what I'm trying to get at, is we're basically drafting a policy as we move, going through here. And we're doing it in 20 minutes. It is the discussion point. Okay, so, sorry, I can only go to the people. Well, yeah, I can only go back to once. So based on that, so anything else you'd like to say? Okay, Councillor Bondi.
Great, thank you, Mayor Kim. So the next council meeting is May 8th. So any flag raising that's scheduled between now and May 8th, and this doesn't have to be part of a motion, we can just say it and agree on it, right? We don't have to put it in writing. Anything between now and May 8th would go ahead as scheduled. Anything beyond that, no, would need council approval. And if the flag's gone up for 25 years, year after year, it still needs council approval. This isn't meant to be terribly easy. I think what I'm trying to accomplish is that council controls it and council makes a decision. So when I hear, Councillor B. McGregor say, it's very important that this flag, well, that flag may go up. Like, nobody's excluding any flag. It's just saying we're going to fly these three governmental flags unless there's a move by council to raise a flag. So council will make that decision. And if Councillor McGregor wants to bring National Cupcake Day flag and, make a motion to bring that up, I don't think it'll pass, but he'd have that ability. But nobody's going to do silly things like that because we're not going to waste council's time. So I think this is fine. That can be the policy. And we've all had the opportunity to read Councillor Crew's motion if this fails. And it's rather similar, but it says administration will handle it and take care of it. And then in 2 years from now, council will have forgotten all about it, and we will be where we are today, where I drive by and see a flag that went up. I don't even know what the flag means sometimes. And that's what we're trying to kind of control. So I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, given that, that's the final word on this, and that.
Point of order, it's been amended 4 times since I've spoken.
Well, no, so the only amendment is that any exception to the flag raising policy be the sole decision of council.
And then, okay.
We haven't added anything else to it. It's only that.
Okay.
I will put it to vote now.
All votes are in and the motion is defeated, 12-5.
Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Bear with me because my screen's not that big. Whereas flags are a recognized symbol of nations, territories, community organizations, and civic pride, and whereas community flag raisings enhance public awareness of activities important to Chatham-Kent residents, and whereas flying flags at half-mast denote official periods of mourning, and whereas there is no Chatham-Kent policy, protocol, or guidelines that provide consistent and fair practices, therefore, be it resolved that administration develop a policy and protocol to provide clear direction and an administrative framework for the proper and consistent use of flags and flagpoles at all municipal facilities. And this includes community flag raisings, honoring Chatham-Kent's diversity and important community events to ensure that they occur in a fair, orderly, and consistent manner. And consultation for this policy include community groups who have displayed flags, those who have expressed interest in displaying flags, and input from the Diversity, Inclusion, Equity, and Justice Committee, and as well review what other communities have in place, and that this draft policy be returned to Council September 2023 for voting. I so move. If I get a seconder, I have just a couple comments.
Councillor B. McGregor?
I will emphatically second that motion.
Thank you. I understand the intent around Councillor Jubenville's motion, and I understand when community groups are excluded. If that was someone that I was passionate about, I definitely would have done probably the same thing. I've been known to be a little passionate about things, and then I assume and feel my opinion is the correct one, but we all have passions about groups and organizations and causes and different things in our community. And to cut off one or the other is not fair or democratic, and I wouldn't want to live in a society that just thought I was right all the time, which I am pretty much. But so I'm hoping that staff will come back with something that's fair, consistent, and recognizes all groups except for groups that are involved in hate and any of those other things that don't support the values in Chatham-Kent. When I read Violet's little message, it really said, you know, this is what we're about, and this is what we need in our community. So I think that it's fair to take this out of the hands of the mayor's office or even around the council table, because it's not fair to put all the decisions, when they're controversial, on one group or one group of people within our organization without the guidelines and clear, consistent practices for all of us to follow in Chatham-Kent. We are not the only building in Chatham-Kent, and we're not the most important, although we'd like to think so. I received a phone call from folks at the Wish Center today. We're municipal, so we can't put our flagpole up that we've been talking about. to fly a flag for Black history, right? So like these things matter to our community and they're important. And I think that I can't say it any better than Councillor McGregor said earlier about inclusivity and what our community stands for. So I hope that you'll support this. It's asking for a policy to come back, and we still get to vote on this policy. If we don't like it, change it, add things, whatever. But I know that staff will engage the community as we've asked, and perhaps engage the community on Let's Talk CK, whoever's in charge of doing this. So thank you. I've rambled enough. That's all I have to say. I hope that you'll support this.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 14-3.
Closed session reports, Councillor Crew, and I'll get Councillor McGrail to second them.
Thank you. Council directed administration on personal matters about identifiable individuals with regard to the Chatham-Kent Age-Friendly Advisory Committee appointments, Section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act, 2001. Council received information on personal matters about identifiable individuals with regard to mutual respect complaints, Section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act, 2001. I so move.
And I second.
Any questions? We'll put it to vote then.
Councillor Crew?
Approval of communication items. Councillor McGrail, you have an item you want to pull, and Councillor Story, you have an item. So I'll go to you, Councillor McGrail, start.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I would like to do a resolution on 3A or B, the one in relation to rural and northern schools. So in this, it resolves that the province of Ontario increases the rural and northern education fund to $50 million. That should the moratorium be lifted, that the moratorium remain in place for schools that qualify for the RNEF until a thorough review of education funding formula is completed, and that before templates required by the 2018 Pupil Accommodation Review Guideline are developed, there be consultation with school boards and community groups, including the Community School Alliances. So just so everyone is aware, is that...
Sorry, can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Just so everyone's aware that this funding we use here in Chatham-Kent, in Dresden, in Merlin, in Tensville, in Tilbury, and Blenheim, high schools and elementary schools. So this is important to us, and I also request that we send this to the Ministry of Education, MPP McNaughton, MPP Jones, our Roma Zone 1 municipalities, Roma, AMO, and WOW-C. Please.
Okay, any other questions? Anyone opposed to this? Motion passes. Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I know I'm probably in the way of a Leaf game, so I don't want to speak too long, but I appreciate council's support. What did they lose? Oh, no, sorry, getting distracted. I appreciate council's support. Previously in my running for a board position with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. That was to fill out the remainder of that board term because they had vacancies. And so the following board term is a full year and starts at the end of May. I really enjoyed my time with this organization, learning more about it. Just to recap, at our last meeting, I met with a GTA counselor who was looking at innovative insurance options, counselors from Newfoundland dealing with shoreline issues, Quebec working on innovative organic waste management, Saskatchewan working on abandoned and orphan gas wells. So issues that really cross our country, and I'd really like to continue that advocacy with council support. Thank you very much. And there is a resolution. Oh, there it is. Merritt's got it.
Councillor
Thank
B.
you for-
McGregor, you move that,
you.
seconded by Councillor Finn. All right, anything else you want to add, Councillor Story?
No, I just appreciate your support. Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Seeing, Councillor Jubenville.
No, I support you, Allison, or Councillor Story. I'm just wondering just a rough estimate of cost. Do you have a guesstimate?
No, that's a great question. I do not yet, but our meetings tend to be in the GTA, so it would likely be transportation to the GTA and possibly a hotel. Thank you.
Okay.
And I can clarify that when I have them specifically.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, anyone opposed? Motion carries. For all the other communication, sorry, Councillor Finn, go ahead.
Long time ago.
Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Scotchy, anyone opposed? Done, all right, we'll move forward. All the other communication items, Councillor Doyle and Councillor Jubenville, can I get you to approve move and second the rest of them?
Happy to move that, Mayor Caniff.
Anyone opposed?
I'm happy to second.
Motion carried. Non-agenda business. Anybody want to comment on the Leaf score? Oh, okay, can't be good then. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some positive hockey news. A local 16-year-old from Wheatley, Ontario has been drafted 4th round to the Kitchener Rangers, Cameron Arquette. Not only is he a straight A student, he also is a very humble, well-rounded individual from a very, very good family. So I just wanted to extend congratulations to him on his much success in sport and academics.
Councillor Finn.
I'd like to also extend congratulations to 3 young boxers who did a lot of fundraising to head out to Nova Scotia with their coaches. Matea Marchand, Kyan Holland, and Landon Wilmot all won their bouts last night. Congratulations.
Councillor Story.
I just want to give a shout out to 2 high schools doing great things in Chatham-Kent. The first being the CKSS Choir, who just won a very prestigious choir competition in Windsor. So thrilled to hear that. And also the Wellsburg High School Drama Club is in Hamilton tonight, competing at the regional drama theater competition. It's an all-Indigenous cast, and the play is amazing. I saw it last week, so really proud to see our high schools doing such great things. Congratulations to both.
Excellent. Seeing no other, we'll go on to reading of the bylaws, first and second. Councillor Pinsonneau, Councillor Allen.
So moved.
So seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Third and final reading, Councillor C. McGregor and Councillor B. McGregor.
No, I'd like to stay a little bit longer, please. Yes,
Less
thanks.
emphatically.
Okay, less emphatic, all right. Anyone opposed? Motion carried. The closing of council, we'll go over to Councillor Crew, and we'll have Councillor Anderson wrap it up for us. She was the one that looked at me.
That Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, May 8th, 2023, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. I so move.
I so second.
Anyone opposed to wrapping this up at 9 something, 9:35? Excellent. Have a great night, everyone.